My ungrateful kids took my savings, but they forgot about my secret $5 million land. True story. Have you ever felt like your generosity was seen not as a virtue, but as a weakness? Have you ever loved someone so fiercely, only to watch them become a stranger, twisted by another's influence? I have. And I assure you, it changes a person. Have you ever watched the child you devoted your life to cast you aside for the person they married? I have. But they didn't know I would be the one to write the final chapter of their story. The day started like any other, a quiet Tuesday morning. I remember the gentle hum of the refrigerator, a familiar backdrop to my peaceful existence. Sunlight, filtered through the lace curtains, warmed my small kitchen. I was humming a soft tune, one my late husband, Thomas, used to sing, as I watered my hydrangeas. Their vibrant blue and pink blooms were a simple pleasure, a splash of joy in my otherwise predictable life. My small pension, meticulously managed, was enough to keep me comfortable. It sat in my savings account, my safety net, my emergency fund, the little bit of security I had painstakingly built over years of careful living and prudent choices. It was there for the true emergencies, a sudden medical bill, a necessary home repair, or, God forbid, a really long, unforeseen rainy day. I trusted my son, Orion, implicitly. Or, at least, I thought I did. He was my only child, the boy I'd raised with every ounce of my love and devotion, every sacrifice I could possibly make. But then, there was Kaylin, his wife. Her presence in our lives had been a slow, insidious poison, corroding the bonds I held so dear. The phone rang, its shrill insistence jarring me from my peaceful reverie. I nearly dropped the watering can. It was Kaylin. I saw her name flash on the screen and felt an immediate, familiar tightening in my chest. Her voice, when I answered, was a saccharine-sweet melody that always sent a subtle shiver down my spine, a warning bell only I seemed to hear. "Elara, darling. How are you? Listen, Orion and I have this incredible opportunity, a business venture that's going to revolutionize the market. It's absolutely brilliant, a game changer." Her words tumbled out, a practiced cascade of false enthusiasm, too eager, too bright, like a cheap bauble designed to distract. "But we need a little seed money. Just for a few weeks, you understand? We'll pay you back, with interest, of course. You know Orion would never let you down." I knew what she was doing. This wasn't the first time she'd asked for money, or implied some grand scheme that never materialized. But my savings? This was different. This was my very foundation. "Kaylin," I said, my voice trembling slightly, trying to inject some firmness into it, "you know that money is my emergency fund. It's all I have for unexpected expenses. It's what keeps me secure." I felt a knot of dread forming in my stomach. She giggled, a sound like glass shards tinkling against each other, utterly devoid of warmth. "Oh, Elara, don't be so dramatic. It's not like you're going to need it tomorrow. Think of it as investing in your son's future. Don't you want to see Orion succeed? Don't you want to see your grandchildren live a life of luxury? This is for them, Elara. For their future." She always knew how to twist the knife, how to make me feel guilty for simply wanting to safeguard my own modest security. She painted me as selfish, as unsupportive, as a relic holding back progress. And then she added, almost as an afterthought, in a tone that dismissed any chance of refusal, "We've already transferred it, actually. Just needed your verbal confirmation. The bank needed to verify, you know, for security purposes. All very standard." My blood ran cold. The watering can slipped from my grasp, thankfully empty, hitting the floor with a soft thud. You what?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper, the horror of her words sinking in. "You transferred it without my permission? Without even waiting for me to say yes?" "Oh, come on, Elara," she scoffed, dropping the sweet facade as quickly as she'd put it on. Her voice now was laced with an icy disdain, a sneer I could almost feel through the phone. "Don't pretend you didn't agree. We discussed this last week. You said you'd help us out. You always do. Besides, it's just sitting there, gathering dust. This money will actually do something productive now. It will multiply, Alara, multiply. I remembered a vague conversation, Kaylin droning on about some opportunity while I was half listening, preoccupied with a complex new recipe I was trying to master. I must have mumbled something non-committal, an absent-minded and she'd taken it as a green light, a full, enthusiastic consent. My stomach churned, a bitter bile rising in my throat. This wasn't a loan or a favor. This was theft. Plain and simple. A blatant, unapologetic violation of my trust and my meager security. Kaylin, that was my life savings. My pension alone isn't enough for everything. What if I get sick? What if my roof leaks? What if I need expensive medication? I pleaded, my voice rising, bordering on a cry. Honestly, Alara, you're so dramatic, she drawled, a cruel edge to her tone, utterly unsympathetic. It's just money. You'll get it back. Probably. Look, I have to go. Big meeting. Talk soon. And with that, she hung up, leaving me staring at my phone, the dial tone mocking my helplessness, its flat sound echoing the emptiness I felt in my bank account. My hands were shaking, my breath caught in my throat. I immediately called Orion. My fingers fumbled with the keypad. He answered on the third ring, his voice subdued, tinged with a hesitation that spoke volumes. Mom? What's wrong? Is everything okay? Orion, I said, my voice trembling, trying to keep it from breaking, your wife just emptied my savings account. She said you two had an urgent business investment. Did you know about this? Did you agree to this? There was a long silence on the other end, punctuated by what sounded like Kaylin's distant, sharp voice, too muffled to make out the words, but clearly a reprimand. Then Orion cleared his throat, a nervous, weak sound. Mom, listen, it's just for a little while. Kaylin really believes in this. It's a big deal. We'll pay you back, I promise. Everything will be fine, you'll see. His voice was weak, devoid of conviction, a mere echo of Kaylin's agenda. But Orion, I pressed, my heart aching with a familiar pain, she didn't even ask me properly. She just took it. And it's everything. What if something happens? What if I need it? What then? Look, Mom, you don't understand the scale of this opportunity, he said, sounding rehearsed, almost robotic, like Kaylin had coached him through every word, every excuse. It's going to change everything for us. For our future. For the kids. You wouldn't want to stand in the way of that, would you? You always want what's best for us, don't you? The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost laughable, if it hadn't been so devastating. So you're saying you're okay with this? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet now, filled with a raw hurt. With Kaylin just taking my money, without my explicit consent? You're okay with me being left with nothing? Another silence. A heavy, shameful silence that stretched between us like an impassable chasm. Mom, please, just trust us. It'll be fine. I have to go now. Kaylin's calling me. He couldn't even meet my question with a direct answer. He just wanted to get off the phone. He was a coward, plain and simple. He was standing by, letting his wife bleed me dry, and he wouldn't even lift a finger, or his voice, to defend me. It was like he was a stranger, not the son I had sacrificed so much for, not the boy who once held my hand and promised to always take care of me. The realization was a bitter pill, difficult to swallow. The very next weekend, my humiliation was compounded, laid bare for my entire family to witness. It was my niece's engagement party, a large family gathering filled with distant relatives I rarely saw and old friends I cherished. I tried to put on a brave face, to pretend that my world hadn't just been turned upside down, that my sense of security hadn't been ripped away. I wore my best dress, a deep sapphire blue, hoping it would project an image of calm and resilience. But Kaylin, it seemed, wasn't content with just emptying my bank account. She needed to ensure everyone knew my place, or rather, the place she had designated for me. I was chatting with my sister, Eleanor, laughing about old times, reminiscing about childhood antics, a rare moment of genuine ease. Eleanor, ever perceptive, had already sensed my underlying distress, her eyes filled with concern as she gently squeezed my arm. Just then, Kaylin approached, a glass of champagne in hand, her smile fixed and predatory, like a cat toying with its prey. She had an aura of manufactured glamour, glittering with a superficial sheen. She put an arm around Orion, who looked distinctly uncomfortable, his gaze avoiding mine, fixed somewhere on the opulent chandelier above. Then she turned to me, her voice cutting through the gentle hum of conversation. "Elara, darling. So glad you could make it. You know, it's so important for the older generation to stay active, even if it's just attending parties. Keeps the mind sharp, doesn't it? Prevents one from becoming stagnant." Her voice was loud enough for those nearby to hear, designed for an audience. I felt my cheeks flush, a wave of heat rising. It was a thinly veiled jab at my age, a public declaration that I was past my prime, a burden, a faded photograph in a vibrant album. "I'm quite active, Kaylin," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, to project an air of composure I didn't feel. "I still volunteer at the library 3 times a week, you know. Keeps me busy and engaged." She chuckled, a dismissive sound, her eyes glinting with amusement. "Oh, yes, the library. How quaint. But really, Elara, don't you think it's time to fully retire? Relax? Let Orion and I take care of everything? After all, you've been so generous with your contributions to our business. We really appreciate it. Don't we, Orion?" She squeezed Orion's arm, her grip possessive. He just offered a weak, forced smile, looking anywhere but at me, a puppet on her strings. "Contributions?" I asked, my voice dangerously low, a tremor of anger beginning to run through it. "You mean my life savings that you took without my permission?" Kaylin's eyes widened theatrically, feigning shock. "Oh, Elara, please. Don't make a scene. It was a loan, for goodness sake. And a very small one, considering the astronomical returns we're going to get. Honestly, you'd think I'd asked for your entire estate. Some people just don't understand modern business, do they, dear?" She looked around at the small crowd that had gathered, drawn by her raised voice and the sudden tension, and offered a condescending smirk, a dismissive wave of her hand. "It's tough, you know, dealing with people who are so set in their ways. So resistant to progress. It's almost like they want to hold you back, isn't it?" Her words dripped with patronizing pity, painting me as an obstacle to their grand ambitions. My sister, Eleanor, looked horrified, her mouth opening to interject, but before she could speak, Kaylin continued, her voice dripping with mock concern, a saccharine tone that grated on my nerves. "You know, Elara, I was thinking. With your pension being so small, and now that you've invested so much in our future, maybe you should consider moving in with us? We have a spare room, a little nook really, by the laundry room. It would be so convenient for you. And for us, of course. You could help out with the children more. They adore you, you know. And someone needs to be around to make sure the house is always tidy when I have my influencer meetings, or when I'm too busy building my brand." The implication was clearer than crystal. I was to be her live-in maid, my financial vulnerability exposed for all to see, my worth reduced to nothing more than a domestic convenience. Orion just stood there, his eyes fixed on the floor, saying nothing, doing nothing. He was complicit. He had become her puppet, a silent observer to my public degradation. The air left my lungs. My vision blurred. It wasn't just the money anymore. It was the sheer, unadulterated cruelty, the complete lack of respect, and the crushing realization that my own son, my beloved Orion, had abandoned me entirely. My patience, a well I thought was bottomless, a reservoir of forgiveness and understanding, finally ran dry. Every drop of love, every ounce of forgiveness I held for them, evaporated in that moment. Something within me snapped. I felt a cold resolve settle in my bones, a quiet fury that was far more dangerous than any outburst. They thought they had taken everything. They thought I was a harmless old woman with no power, no assets, no fight left in her. They were about to learn how gravely mistaken they were. This was the final straw. They had pushed me too far, and now, they would pay. And you think this was the first time? Oh, if only. That public humiliation, that blatant theft, that was just the grand finale of a symphony of disrespect that had been playing for years. A slow, agonizing crescendo of casual cruelty and calculated exploitation. When I look back, I see a long, winding road paved with my quiet sacrifices and their ever-growing sense of entitlement. It started subtly, as these things often do, with whispers and veiled requests that I, in my naive love, mistook for genuine needs. Kaylin, fresh out of university, married my Orion almost 12 years ago. I remembered her then, a whirlwind of energy and charm. She was vivacious, always impeccably dressed, her laughter bright and infectious. At first, I was delighted. Orion had always been a quiet boy, thoughtful but reserved, and I thought Kaylin's vibrant energy would bring him out of his shell, make him shine. Little did I know, she was less interested in his shell and more interested in his pliable nature and, eventually, my perceived resources. She saw him not as a partner, but as a malleable tool, and me as a convenient resource. Early on, it was small things, almost imperceptible shifts in the dynamic. "Alara, could you just whip up one of your famous apple pies for Orion's office party? Everyone raves about them." Of course, I would. I loved baking for my son, seeing his colleagues enjoy my efforts. Then it became, "Oh, Alara, this stain is impossible. My dry cleaner is so far, and the kids are being wild. Could you maybe take this dry cleaning for us when you're out? It would be a lifesaver." Or, "The kids are so rowdy today, I just need a moment to myself to prepare for my influencer pitch. Could you watch them for a few hours? Just pop over. They adore you, you know." And I would. Because I loved my grandchildren, and I believed I was helping my son and his wife navigate the early years of marriage and parenthood. I cooked for them, cleaned for them, babysat for them, often dropping everything at a moment's notice, rearranging my own quiet plans. There was never an offer of payment, rarely even a genuine thank you. It was just expected, my duty, a service I was meant to provide. I started to feel less like a loving mother and grandmother, and more like an unpaid, on-call assistant. Then came the financial requests, the gradual escalation of their demands. The first time was for a car. "Alara, darling, our car just broke down. We really need a new one for work, for taking the kids to school. Could you lend us a few thousand? We'll pay you back next month, promise." I had hesitated, but Orion had looked so worried, so I had opened my purse, drawing from savings that were not meant for a new car. Next month would come and go. When I'd gently remind them, Kaylin would scoff, "Oh, Alara, are you really nickel-and-diming your own son? We're family. Besides, we had an unexpected expense, a new business opportunity, you know. You wouldn't want us to go without, would you? You wouldn't want to jeopardize our future." Orion would just shrug, looking uncomfortable, his eyes darting away, never defending me, never insisting on repayment. The debts would simply vanish, swallowed by Kaylin's insatiable appetite for designer clothes, expensive gadgets, and Orion's spineless compliance. There was the loan for Kaylin's influencer equipment, then the investment in a dubious cryptocurrency scheme, then the emergency when their lavish holiday went over budget. Each time, I felt a piece of my security, and my dignity, chip away. I remember one Christmas Eve, about 5 years ago. I'd spent days baking and preparing a feast, my famous roast turkey, a medley of roasted vegetables, homemade cranberry sauce, and 2 of my legendary apple pies. I arrived at their sprawling, rented house, arms laden with food, juggling bags and dishes, only to find Kaylin on the phone in the living room, her voice animated, describing her stressful day of shopping for designer gifts. "Oh, Alara, you're here. Wonderful. Just pop everything in the oven, won't you? And the table needs setting. The good china, please. It's in the top cabinet, you might need a stool. We're starving. She didn't even look up from her phone, just gestured vaguely towards the kitchen. I was a caterer, a decorator, a maid, anything but a beloved mother and grandmother coming to celebrate the holidays. Orion, meanwhile, was buried in his phone, occasionally grunting a greeting, seemingly oblivious to his wife's blatant disrespect, or perhaps, simply unwilling to acknowledge it. He used to be so attentive, so thoughtful, always offering to help. Now, he seemed to exist only in Kaylin's orbit, a satellite to her sun. She constantly belittled my tastes, my choices, my very existence. My quiet life as a retired librarian was quaint or boring, a waste of potential. My simple, comfortable clothes were outdated and frumpy. My small, cozy home, filled with memories, was a relic from another era, barely worthy of a visit. She'd make snide remarks about my small pension in front of family friends, implying I was a financial drain, a burden, someone who couldn't keep up with their grand lifestyle. "Oh, Alara, are you sure you should be buying that? It's a bit pricey for your budget, isn't it?" she'd say, loud enough for others to hear, when I was simply buying a new book or a small plant for my windowsill. It chipped away at my dignity, piece by agonizing piece, eroding my self-worth until I almost believed her. My son, my dear Orion, had slowly but surely drifted away. It was imperceptible at first, like the tide receding, taking tiny grains of sand with it, leaving a barren shore behind. He'd stop calling as often. His visits became rarer, always with Kaylin by his side, directing the conversation, dictating the duration of their stay. When I tried to talk to him about Kaylin's behavior, about how her words hurt me, he'd become defensive, his eyes glazed over with a strange apathy. "Mom, you just don't understand Kaylin. She's got a big personality. She doesn't mean anything by it. You're just being too sensitive." Or, "Mom, you need to relax. Everything's fine. You're overthinking it." He'd brush aside my concerns, invalidate my feelings, always choosing Kaylin's side, always prioritizing her demands over my well-being, over his own mother's peace of mind. He was no longer my son, he was Kaylin's husband, her puppet, her silent enabler. I remember one particularly painful incident. My old friend, Martha, a kindred spirit from my library days, had passed away, and I was heartbroken. I called Orion, needing comfort, a shoulder to cry on, a kind voice to soothe my grief. He listened for a moment, his voice softening, and I felt a flicker of hope, a connection to the son I remembered. Then Kaylin's voice cut in from the background, sharp and impatient, a cruel discordant note. "Orion, are you still on the phone with your mother? We're going to be late for our reservation. Tell her you'll call her back. You know how important this dinner is." And he did. "Mom, I have to go. Kaylin's right, we're late. I'll call you later." He never did. I mourned Martha alone, feeling utterly abandoned, my grief compounded by the cold realization that I truly had no one to turn to, not even my own son. Each time, I told myself, it's just Kaylin being Kaylin. She'll change. Orion will see. He'll stand up for me. I made excuses for them. I believed in the power of family, in the enduring bond between a mother and her son. I hoped that if I just kept giving, kept being understanding, kept loving them unconditionally, they would eventually realize my worth, my sacrifices. I hoped for a glimmer of gratitude, a sliver of respect. But there was never any. Only more demands, more slights, more silence from Orion. My life became a perpetual state of giving, and theirs, a perpetual state of taking. My quiet generosity was seen not as a virtue, but as a weakness to be exploited. My nurturing spirit was perceived as a boundless resource to be drained. They had systematically eroded my confidence, my peace of mind, and ultimately, my financial security. That final act, the emptying of my savings account, coupled with the public shaming, it wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was the complete obliteration of my hope. And it left me with nothing left to lose. They thought they had left me with nothing, but they were wrong. They didn't know about the final secret I had quietly held on to for decades. But they didn't know about the final secret I had quietly held on to for decades, nestled deep within the dusty archives of my life. It wasn't something my late husband left me, or a recent inheritance from a forgotten relative. No, it was far more obscure, far more unexpected, a quiet testament to a small kindness long ago. It was a dusty, unassuming document, tucked away in a safety deposit box that had long been forgotten about, even by me, until a few months ago when I was sorting through some old papers from my library days. Decades ago, when I was much younger, in my late 20s, a distant, eccentric cousin, a man I barely knew named Silas Finch, passed away. He was a recluse, a bit of a forgotten figure in our sprawling family tree, known only for his peculiar habits and his vast collection of antique maps. He had no direct heirs, and through a convoluted will, I, being the only one who had ever bothered to send him a Christmas card or a birthday greeting, just a simple, unadorned note of kindness, was named as a beneficiary. What he left me wasn't cash, or jewelry, or a grand house. It was a deed. A deed to a parcel of undeveloped land, miles away, in what was then a remote, forgotten corner of the state, a place no one wanted. At the time, the land was considered utterly worthless. Undevelopable wetlands, the lawyer had called it with a shrug, his tone dismissive. Might be good for a bird sanctuary, if you're feeling ambitious, Alara, but don't expect any returns. I had accepted the deed, filed it away in a dusty folder, and promptly forgot about it. It was a piece of paper, a curiosity, nothing more. A small, insignificant footnote in my life. I never told anyone about it. Not my parents, not my husband Thomas, and certainly not Orion or Kaylin. It was just, there. A forgotten secret, a non-asset, a quiet eccentricity from a quiet cousin. Until about 6 months ago. I was going through some old boxes in the attic, cleaning out the accumulated memories of a lifetime, the kind of task retired librarians embark on to fill their days, organizing the chaos of the past. I stumbled upon a dusty old file, hidden beneath old photo albums and forgotten letters, labeled Silas Finch, Estate. Inside, among yellowed letters and a faded photograph of Silas looking bemused, was the deed. Out of sheer curiosity, a librarian's instinct for information, I decided to do a quick online search. I typed in the coordinates, the parcel number, expecting to find nothing, or perhaps some old, obscure environmental report confirming its uselessness. What I found instead made my jaw drop, my breath catch in my throat. The undevelopable wetlands had, over the decades, become prime real estate. A major highway extension had been approved nearby, a new tech hub was being built just a few miles away, and the area, once considered barren, was now booming. The land, my land, the one I had forgotten about, was no longer worthless. In fact, preliminary reports from various development firms estimated its value to be in the millions. $5 million. A staggering, almost unbelievable sum. I sought out an old acquaintance, a meticulous land surveyor, who confirmed the shocking valuation. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in my chest. I sat there, clutching the crumpled deed, a whirlwind of emotion swirling within me. Shock, disbelief, a flicker of something akin to vindication, a quiet sense of destiny. This was my trump card. My secret weapon. The rainy day fund I never knew I had, a gift from a forgotten kindness. I decided then and there that I would keep it a secret. This was mine. A gift from a forgotten relative, a silent testament to my own quiet kindness. It was a safeguard, a promise of security, a shield against whatever life might throw at me. And life had thrown something at me. It had thrown Kaylin, her avarice and cruelty. It had thrown Orion's complicity, his spineless abandonment. The revelation of the land's value had come just weeks before Kaylin emptied my savings account. The timing, in retrospect, felt almost divinely ordained. A quiet cosmic joke played at their expense. When Kaylin called, her voice dripping with false sweetness, when she told me my modest savings were transferred, when she dismissed my pleas with cruel sarcasm, and when Orion remained silent, my heart, which had been so soft, so forgiving, hardened like stone. The humiliation at the engagement party was the final blow, stripping away the last vestiges of my hope and my love for them. They believed they had left me destitute, powerless, stripped of everything. They thought I was a broken old woman, ready to wither away in a small nook by the laundry room. But I wasn't broken. I was reborn. Reborn in a crucible of their greed and disrespect, tempered by years of their insidious abuse. The decision was swift, cold, and absolute. They wanted to take everything from me? Fine. I would take everything from them. Not money, not possessions, for those were fleeting. I would take their illusion of control, their sense of entitlement, their very foundation of perceived financial security. They wouldn't just be denied my money, they would be denied the very idea that they held any power over me. That $5 million land? It was no longer a secret nest egg for a hypothetical rainy day. It was my weapon. My retribution. My escape. It was the lever that would turn their world upside down. I would sell it. And Kaylin and Orion, who had so gleefully stripped me of my modest security, would receive precisely nothing. Not a penny, not a shred of benefit. The very notion that I might have something valuable, something they could sink their greedy claws into, had never crossed their minds. And that was their fatal flaw. They had underestimated me. They had underestimated the quiet librarian who had, for too long, endured their contempt. My patience had run out, and now, my turn had come. And then, the day came. The day everything would be laid bare, not with a roar, but with a quiet, devastating whisper. I had planned it meticulously, with the same precision I used to catalog books in the library, each step calculated, each detail considered. It wasn't going to be a dramatic confrontation at a family dinner, or a lawyer's office filled with shocked faces. No, that was too theatrical, too much like Kaylin's preferred stage. I wanted something more subtle, yet utterly devastating. Something that would hit them where it truly hurt, their public image, their social standing, and their insatiable desire for money and status. I had been working quietly with a reputable real estate firm, a discreet team specializing in high-value land sales. They understood the need for confidentiality. The buyer was a major development corporation, Global Innovations, eager to break ground on the new tech campus that was transforming the region. The sale was finalized quickly, efficiently, and with minimal fuss. The substantial funds were transferred into a new, completely separate, and undisclosed account, a fortress of my own making. My new secret, far more formidable than the last. The climax wouldn't be a big reveal in person. It would be through the ripple effect, the dawning horror that would slowly, inexorably, engulf them, leaving them exposed and humiliated. Kaylin, the self-proclaimed lifestyle influencer, was always obsessed with networking and climbing the ladder, with being seen in the right circles. She attended every charity gala, every real estate launch, every exclusive event she could strong-arm her way into, believing that proximity to wealth translated to her own status. And so, I knew exactly where to plant the seed of their downfall. It was the annual Future of Innovation Luncheon, a prestigious event held in the city's grandest ballroom, a place Kaylin had practically moved mountains to get tickets for. She was there, of course, draped in some impossibly expensive designer outfit, her laugh echoing a little too loudly, too forced, as she flitted from table to table, trying to impress everyone. Orion was there too, looking distinctly uncomfortable in a suit that was clearly too tight, probably bought with my borrowed savings. His eyes held a familiar, hunted look. I, however, was not there as a mere guest. I was there, quietly, at a table near the back, having been invited as a distinguished local historian by a mutual acquaintance of the land developer and myself, someone who had helped me with some historical documents related to the property's provenance. I wore a simple, elegant black dress, blending in, observing, waiting. During the networking hour, a chaotic symphony of polite chatter and clinking glasses, I saw Kaylin making a beeline for Mr. Harrison, the formidable CEO of Global Innovations, the very company that had just purchased my land. She was gushing, flattering, her voice rising in pitches only a dog could truly appreciate, trying to pitch some vague influencer collaboration that she believed would secure her a lucrative, life-changing contract. I watched, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips, a quiet satisfaction blossoming in my chest. When she finally finished her spiel, a breathless monologue of buzzwords and self-promotion, Mr. Harrison, a shrewd, no-nonsense man with kind eyes, gave her a polite but dismissive nod. "Interesting, Ms. Vance," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "But I must say, our focus right now is primarily on the new tech campus. We've just finalized the acquisition of a truly remarkable parcel of land that will be the cornerstone of the entire project. It's a game-changer for the region, truly." He paused, looking around, his eyes sweeping past Kaylin and Orion, then settling directly on me, a warm, appreciative smile gracing his lips. "In fact, the original owner of that land, a truly visionary woman who understood its potential long before anyone else, is right here with us today. A true testament to foresight." He gestured towards me, his hand extended. My heart gave a little flutter, a nervous but exhilarating tremor, but I remained outwardly calm, my expression serene. Kaylin's head snapped towards me, her fixed smile faltering, replaced by a look of utter confusion, then dawning recognition. Orion, who had been standing awkwardly beside her, also looked up, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, slowly morphing into something else. Mr. Harrison, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding, walked over to me, his hand still extended. "Alara, wonderful to see you again," he said warmly, shaking my hand firmly. "I just wanted to publicly express our gratitude. This deal was truly exceptional. $5 million for that prime location, a shrewd negotiation on your part, if I may say so. You truly held your ground." He beamed at me, genuinely impressed, his words carrying clearly in the suddenly hushed air. The words hung in the air, a bell tolling for Kaylin and Orion. $5 million? Kaylin's voice was a strained whisper, barely audible, laced with a grotesque mixture of disbelief and greed. Her face, usually so composed, so carefully made up, contorted in a mask of absolute shock, her eyes wide, darting from Mr. Harrison to me, then back again, trying to process the impossible, the unfathomable. "Alara? You? Land? 5 million? I simply offered her a serene, unblinking gaze, my quiet dignity a stark contrast to her unraveling composure. "Yes, Kaylin," I said, my voice clear and steady, devoid of any emotion, any triumph. "The undeveloped parcel of land I inherited decades ago. The one you never knew about. The one that was supposedly worthless and undevelopable wetlands." Orion, who had finally connected the dots, looked like he'd been punched in the gut. His face went ashen, his eyes wide with a horrifying realization. "Mom? You had that? All this time? And you didn't say anything?" "All this time," I confirmed, my gaze unwavering, holding his gaze until he looked away in shame. "A quiet investment. For a very long rainy day. Which, it seems, has now arrived. And it has served its purpose beautifully." Kaylin's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Her eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, were wide with a dawning horror, a sickening realization of what she had lost, not just the opportunity to exploit me further, but the potential to have had a share, a significant share, in this wealth, had she only treated me with an ounce of respect. $5 million. A sum far beyond anything she had ever managed to influence or borrow. She had envisioned me as a penniless old woman, utterly dependent on them, a maid to be exploited. And now, this. But you said you had no money." Kaylin finally choked out, her voice rising in a desperate, accusatory screech, a raw, ugly sound that tore through the polite chatter of the luncheon. "You said your savings were all you had. You let us take your last penny. You lied." I smiled, a genuine, albeit cold, smile. "My modest savings, Kaylin, were my immediate emergency fund. The one you so callously emptied. The one I worked tirelessly to build and safeguard. This land, however, was my secret emergency fund. A far greater one. And it was never meant for you. Not a penny of it. Not after what you did." Orion finally found his voice, a pleading tone in his eyes, a desperate flicker of hope in their depth. Mom, please, we had no idea. We were wrong. So wrong. We can work something out, right? We're family. We could invest together. Think of the opportunities. The future we could build. He actually reached for my arm, his hand trembling. I recoiled as if burned, pulling my arm away sharply. Opportunities, Orion? Like the urgent business investment you and Kaylin borrowed my life savings for? The one that left me financially vulnerable, while you both stood by and watched your wife humiliate me publicly? No, Orion. The opportunities for us, for my future, are now entirely mine. And yours, Kaylin, are entirely your own to create. Without my contributions. Kaylin was practically vibrating with rage and disbelief, her face a grotesque mask. You devious old woman. You let us think you were poor. You kept this from your own son. How could you? And you, I countered, my voice still calm, unyielding, treated your own son's mother like a servant, like an ATM, like a relic to be dismissed and exploited. You called my modest savings dust and my home a relic. You stripped me of my dignity. You underestimated me, Kaylin. And that, my dear, was your gravest mistake. The looks on their faces were priceless, etched forever in my memory. Kaylin's was a mixture of absolute shock, seething anger, and a dawning, sickening realization of what she had lost, not just the opportunity to exploit me, but the potential to have had a share in this wealth, had she only treated me with an ounce of human decency. Orion's face was a mirror of shame, regret, and utter despair. He finally saw the chasm his silence and complicity had created. He saw the mother he had alienated, the fortune he had forfeited. He finally understood the true cost of choosing Kaylin over me. The climax wasn't a shouting match, it was the quiet, devastating sound of their world crumbling around them, built on a foundation of their own greed and contempt. I simply turned, nodded politely to Mr. Harrison, and walked away, leaving them to pick up the shattered pieces of their self-serving illusions. So where is my daughter-in-law who called me the maid now, you ask? Oh, her influencer empire, built on borrowed money and superficiality, crumbled faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. Without my contributions, or, more accurately, my stolen funds, and with her true colors exposed, her lavish lifestyle became utterly unsustainable. The urgent business investment she'd bled my savings for? It was, as I suspected, a spectacular failure. It turned out to be a flimsy pyramid scheme, the kind that promised astronomical returns but delivered only debt and ruin. Their creditors came knocking, demanding repayment for the opulent car, the endless stream of designer clothes, the influencer house she'd rented for her online content. Kaylin, who once boasted about her legions of followers and her curated, perfect life, found herself facing a stark reality. Her online presence, once meticulously crafted to project an image of effortless wealth, started to show irreversible cracks. Her followers, many of whom were drawn to her aspirational, wealthy image, grew disillusioned when her facade began to crumble. Rumors of her financial troubles and her egregious treatment of me began to circulate, thanks to a few well-placed anonymous tips, from yours truly, of course, a quiet whisper to a few gossip blogs that specialize in exposing influencer hypocrisy. Her brand deals dried up. Her friends from her exclusive, social climbing circles vanished as quickly as they appeared. The very people she tried so hard to impress, the ones she used to belittle me in front of, now looked at her with pity, or worse, with open schadenfreude. She lost her contracts, her designer endorsements, and eventually, her once gilded reputation. The last I heard, she was working odd jobs, trying to rebuild her life, but the glitz and glamour were gone, replaced by the grim reality of her own making. The irony was palpable, she wanted to be a queen, but she had acted like a beggar, and now she truly had to beg. And Orion? My son, my poor, spineless Orion. The realization of what he had lost, not just financially but in terms of his relationship with me, hit him hard. The shame on his face that day at the luncheon wasn't fleeting, it lingered, a permanent shadow, a stain on his soul. Kaelan, naturally, blamed him for everything. For not being rich enough to begin with, for not handling his mother better, for not being the man she thought he was. Their marriage, already a fragile construct of Kaelan's relentless demands and Orion's spineless compliance, imploded spectacularly. The last I heard, they'd separated, with Kaelan moving back to her parents, having drained Orion of what little he had left, leaving him with nothing but debt and regret. He tried to reach out to me, of course. After the news of my land sale became public knowledge, a story that spread like wildfire, and after Kaelan had finally left him. He called, he sent texts filled with apologies and pleas, he even showed up at my door once, looking haggard, his eyes brimming with tears, a shadow of the vibrant young man he once was. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he choked out, his voice thick with remorse, his shoulders slumped. "I was blind. I was weak. She manipulated me. Please, can we talk? Can we fix this? I miss you, Mom." I looked at him, the boy I had raised with such boundless love, now a broken man, stripped of his pride and his illusions. I felt a pang, a residual echo of the love I once held for him, a deep, aching sadness for the son I had lost. But the cold resolve remained unyielding. "Orion," I said, my voice gentle but firm, devoid of anger, yet heavy with truth, "you weren't blind. You chose to be. You weren't weak, you chose to be complicit. For years, you stood by and watched as I was disrespected, exploited, and humiliated. You chose her over me, every single time. And that choice, my dear, has consequences. Consequences that neither of us can undo." I didn't yell, I didn't berate. I simply stated the facts, the unvarnished truth of his actions and inactions. The truth, delivered calmly, was far more devastating than any anger I could have mustered. I closed the door, not with a slam, but with a quiet click, a soft, definitive sound, severing the last thread between us. It was an ending, and a beginning. My own life, however, has blossomed beyond anything I could have ever imagined. With the proceeds from the land sale, I've secured my future beyond all measure. I bought a beautiful, comfortable home by the sea, a place filled with light and peace, where the sound of waves replaces the distant hum of city life. I established a charitable foundation in my late husband Thomas's name, supporting local libraries and literacy programs, a quiet act of giving, truly from the heart, unlike their transactional greed. I travel to places I'd only ever dreamed of, I volunteer, I spend my days surrounded by people who genuinely appreciate me, who value my wisdom and my presence, not my bank account. The peace I feel now is profound, a quiet triumph, a deep contentment that radiates from within. I reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my peace of mind. Their downfall wasn't a moment of vengeful joy for me. It was a lesson, painful but necessary, a harsh but inevitable reckoning. It showed them, in the most brutal way possible, the consequences of their actions. It taught them that true wealth isn't just measured in dollars, but in respect, gratitude, and the unbreakable bonds of family, bonds they so carelessly severed. They learned that you cannot treat people as disposable resources without facing the inevitable repercussions. Never test anyone's patience to its limits, for the quietest souls often harbor the greatest strength, and the deepest resolve. Are there any other mothers out there who have forgotten themselves for the sake of their children's happiness? Who have sacrificed and given, only to be taken for granted, disrespected, and cast aside? My channel has many similar stories of life lessons learned the hard way, of resilience, and of reclaiming one's power against all odds. If you've ever felt invisible, unappreciated, or betrayed, you are not alone. Share your thoughts, your experiences, your own lessons in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to my channel and turning on notifications. There's always another chapter to be written, another lesson to be shared, and always, always, a way to reclaim your peace.